Welcome to the module Understanding the Main Elements and Sub-Elements of an Innovative Urban Mobility Ecosystem. My name is Elvira Xenou. I'm a Research Associate at the Hellenic Institute of Transport of CERT, and today for this module I'm going to be your tutor. This module is the first part of the analysis of the SPROUT urban policy model, which was developed in order to guide the transition taking place in cities today and support mobility planning. In general, the SPROUT model consisted of three main levels of analysis, or L steps. The first step, which is also the main scope of this module, was to identify the main urban mobility elements that drive innovation and innovative policy planning. In this module, you will see in detail which are those identified and how are those defined. Based on the outcomes of this analysis, a self-assessment tool has been developed in order to assist the cities assessing their levels of readiness, innovation readiness. And finally, the third and final level comes to support the assessment of specific policy actions by analyzing their dynamic effect to the mobility environment. A dedicated module per each of these levels is included in this Civitas Elevate e-course. Now, let's start with the module related to the definition of an innovative urban mobility ecosystem. For designing an innovative and adaptive urban mobility ecosystem, two are the main aspects that every city planner should take into consideration. First, to capture the city's readiness and ability in harnessing new city-led innovation, identifying which are those main elements that affect the city's ability to innovation and which are the city's main weak points where a proactive policy action might be needed. The second aspect reflects to the current performance of the urban mobility ecosystem. An innovative mobility system presupposes high levels of sustainability and livability. So a city planner shall identify and measure the current levels of livability and further identify where and what type of additional policy action might be needed. Taking this into consideration, we have identified 6 main elements that represent cities' main characteristics in the domains of innovation. Each of these elements is further expressed in sub-elements. In total, we have identified 11 sub-elements, either related to the innovation readiness that we mentioned earlier or to the livability of the urban mobility ecosystem. But let's go step by step to each element separately. The first element is called Smart Governance and Growth element and describes how the city authority is organized internally, how the planning is implemented, and if there is a clear strategy towards innovative mobility planning. More specifically, this element is further expressed to the following sub-elements. The level of interdepartmental coordination for implementing innovative procurement practices and facilitating the speedy adoption and assessment of innovative solutions. The sub-element mobility planning, reflecting the existing strategies towards sustainable mobility planning. Liaison, which addresses the need for co-creation and co-planning and describes the process that the city follows for stakeholder engagement. And finally, the sub-element public investments, which reflects the need for competence for fundraising, for innovation, and describes the level of public investments of smart innovative policymaking. The second element is called the climate and city typology element and reflects the need for a city to be open, to be rich in educational and research levels, and green. More specifically, in terms of innovation readiness, this element addresses, at one hand, the level of openness of a city towards international synergies with other cities, synergies with neutral organizations for knowledge transfer and best practices exchange. And on the other hand, the internal capacity in science and innovation in estimating the city's population educational level and examining if a city is a university town or not. In general, it can be seen that universities are great accelerators towards innovation as they encourage curiosity, they provide experience, and they attract ambitious people. Now, in terms of livability, this element is expressed in the sub-elements related to the current sustainability of the urban mobility environment, meaning the current levels of environmental externalities, CO2 emissions, air quality index, noise, and so on. The third element is called the smart and easily accessible element, This element describes the need for a mobility system to be accessible, affordable, and available to all, while the city to provide higher levels of transparency in its governmental processes. In terms of assessing the innovation readiness, this element is expressed through one main sub-element, which addresses the level of smartness and transparency of the governmental processes. Now, in terms of livability, this element is further expressed in the following sub-elements: accessibility and affordability, which expresses the need of accessible and affordable mobility services, and availability, which describes the variety of mobility services available and how much they are used. The fourth element addresses the perception of the users about safety and security when using a mobility service, and is related mainly to the livability performance of a mobility system by measuring the level of safety and security of specific mobility services. The fifth element is called Smart and Innovative Resources and Infrastructure, and highlights the need for an integrated, multimodal and smart infrastructure which will ease the implementation of innovative mobility solutions. Also expresses the need for a highly efficient and effective mobility sector with low levels of congestion and enough space allocated to new mobility solutions, advanced and data-driven knowledge of the city authorities of the need and their mobility system, and a skilled workforce in mobility planning. So it is further expressed to the following sub-elements. In relation to the innovation readiness of the city, two are the main sub-elements identified. First, data availability, which shows how developed the data collection system on both passenger and freight transportation modes is. And the second one is the city's capacity, which addresses the levels of evidence-driven and data-driven policymaking. In relation to the livability performance of a mobility system, these are the levels of efficiency of a mobility system by identifying the allocation of the public space among the different modes of transport, and the levels of convenience, which describes the service levels of the mobility solutions. The final element concerns the people and the stakeholders and describes the city's culture as well as the people's behavior. More specifically, this element is expressed in sub-elements like the city's culture, which means how experienced the city is in implementing innovative business models, and industry diversity, which deals with how rich a city is in terms of number of big innovators and tech companies already established and operating in the city. Now, in terms of the livability part, this element is expressed through one main sub-element, which deals with the general behavior and smartness of the people by identifying their level of acceptance of new business models, their level of compliance in new innovative policy practices, and their level of smartness in their operations. So, the SPROUT urban mobility ecosystem consists of these 6 main elements, which are expressed in 11 sub-elements. Is each element, though, equally weighted? This is a question that was raised within SPROUT, and this is why we asked the experts, the SPROUT experts, assign weights based on the level of importance of each element. The results were quite interesting, I must say, and you can see in the correspondent graphs. According to those, the most important element, as you can see, is the smart governance and growth, and the most important sub-element is the public investment, which means how competent a city is in raising funds towards innovation. The second element that follows is smart and innovative resources and infrastructure, while the elements climate and city typology and smart and easily accessible have been assessed as equally weighted. Finally, in terms of the sub-elements, besides the funding, the SPROUT experts gave particular emphasis to the city's capacity in evidence-driven policymaking and the data availability, to how mature and developed is the data collection system. These two are considered also two of the main challenges in current urban mobility planning and especially current urban city logistics planning. So I would like to thank you all for your attention. I hope everything was clear, and if you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact us directly.